Ingvar Carlsson was Sweden's prime minister from 1986 to 91, and then again 94 to 96. He succeeded Olof Palme after Palme's murder. He was in Palme's government vice prime minister, and as vice prime minister he had, among others, a certain responsibility for questions about the future, how to come to terms with the future, how to shape the future. And this is my question in this talk with him today: the future, the past future, the future in the 1990s. In the meantime, in the interregnum between his two periods as prime minister, he co-chaired with Sridhar Rampal an international expert commission on global governance. And that commission delivered a final report in 1995, Our Global Neighborhood. And this is, I think, the question the report and the questions that we will deal with now. Let us now move over to the world stage. I remember how in the Soviet Union, hordes of economists, economic consultants invaded the mental ruins of the Soviet Union and told them, you just have to do one thing now, and that is to privatize the whole corrupt state economy. And if you privatize it, you will get a private capitalist economy, and after a while, democracy will follow, so to speak. This was the order. First introduce capitalism, then democracy will follow. And in the third world, something similar happened, because then suddenly the talk about development aid and government aid for the development was outmoded. And the third world, the poor countries became partners on a world market, so to speak. They had to open their trades for others, and instead of the public aid came the forest direct investment, so to speak. This was to bring the solution, so their luck would be on the market, on the world market. And one might say now, afterwards, to a certain extent, but it was a greater differentiation among them. You still have poor countries. But this is some of the facts which are behind our talk now. But then going to the West, here too, the language shifted a lot. State became outmoded as a reference point in the debate, and government, instead of state, it became society, and instead of government, it became governance. And no one had talked about governments before. It was unknown in political sciences, and so everybody talked about government. It was something less hierarchical, less corrupt, less bureaucratic. This was, I think, the thinking behind it, I think. And I would like to ask you, how did you experience, did you at all reflect on this shift, or was this something which more or less happened automatically? You suddenly were in another language game, as Wittgenstein would have called it, being the new language. So how did you feel about this? Was it a problem, or did you see it as a shift at all?
It was a rather difficult issue, as a matter of fact. We had built the welfare state with strong state institutions and also in the municipality. And people were happy with that. The Social Democratic Party continued to govern year after year with this policy. But when you had all these institutions functioning with rather detailed decisions about how to act, not only as local municipality state, but also for the individual. After some years, some people felt that they wanted to have more power themselves and decide how they would use the welfare state. And I belonged to them, and the youth organization in Sweden talked about the civil society, not only as something for the individual, but we could create parallel organizations and groups working together on a more cooperative or more free way than if the state was there. Some, and among them many of the old people in my party, they said, well, we governed successfully for 44 years. Then now we had to wait to come back, but we will sure come back. Then we will continue where we were. Mm-hmm. So those people were more looking back, and the young generation looked forward and saw a new path, a new way for the Social Democratic Party. We never really succeeded to solve this, I would say, on the party level. And then came an enemy to us, which was a dangerous one. That was a neoliberal thinking. Ronald Reagan, president in the United States, Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain, and in Sweden, the big industry supported that kind of thinking. So in the beginning of 1990s, parallel to we became members of the European Union, the Social Democrat was under pressure in this respect. And we knew now what have happened. That kind of thinking is now, with the neoliberals, they didn't succeed very well, not in Sweden and not globally. So now it's coming back, also thinking in World Bank and so on, more that policy must play a role in the world. And I never lost that belief. I have believed in policy also on the global level, and that affected my thinking now in the beginning of 1990s when Sonny Ramphel and I became co-chairman in the Commission on Global Governance. Then were we very much thinking about the responsibility of politics.
And let us come into your report in 95. And it is very interesting. I think when I read it, I see two main points with you. One is that you warn exactly what you just said. You say there is a risk that governments will be left behind on the markets because of the fast development on the markets. So there is a need for the governments to take back control, I think you wrote in the report. And this was the one thing here, and I would like to ask you a little bit more about that, how you reflected that. But there is also the other very strong argument about the United Nations. You wanted a reformed United Nations, a new Security Council without permanent members, without veto, and an additional economic and social security council. You should have two legs here, the Security Council for Peace, World Peace, and the Security Council for Social Peace all over the planet, I think. And this, could you say a little bit more of your thinking in the Commission on these issues? You were aware exactly what you say, that at some point here, the global economic forces were taking over the discussion about the civil society. And you warned of it. And at the same time, you saw it is not a world government which is a solution here. It is an open society, world society, but there must be some kind of coordinating center. You emphasize also the role of the General Assembly must be more vitalized and more powerful. The debate, the forum of debate, much.
Well, we were a group of 28 people, most of us former political leaders, but we had also representatives of the civil society. We had university people, economists, and we came from different parts of the world, and we agreed on very far-reaching reforms. That was basically United Nations must be a strong force for peace, for solving international problems. That's a traditional part where Hammarskjöld or Galtman worked very hard. That there we should be strengthened, but strengthened also through more democracy. I mean, it is rather ridiculous. It was already at that time that the winning parts of the Second World War in 1945, they were the ones who could catch power when United Nations was formed. And that's one thing, but we thought at that time that the 5 permanent members should share power with more rotating and so on. So that was a matter of democracy, and it was a matter of responsibility. And when we then looked upon, as you mentioned, what are the problems for states and people today? Yes, not only peace and security, but economic and social security. And we felt that with the neoliberalism which had spread, there was a need for global policy in that respect. And Gro Harlem Brundtland had a commission before us, also initiated by Willy Brandt. And she had presented the new climate policy with sustainability. And we felt United Nations now had to bring her thinking into its policy. So it was a great vision. I admit that, and we were aware of that. But we felt we could not present a report and proposals for the future if we didn't present what we thought were the problems for the world and where United had the responsibility. We had to present that, but of course we were not naive. We understood this will be a very difficult thing to carry through. But then we said we hope for a discussion about this and that we can start a reform process. And we have to accept that it will take time. That's how we looked at these very, very difficult problems when we handed over the report to the Secretary General.
It is. Yes, one notes when one reads the report that you indicated the problem very clearly about the markets taking over from the governments, but you didn't say very much. But on the other hand, Security Council and the economic side and poverty, world poverty, eradication, there you were very precise. And this, I interviewed Sonny Rampol about this and asked him in the Brandt Commission, which was 15 years before you, and asked him about, were you aware in the Brandt Commission about, at the same time as you saw a global Keynesianism with special drawing rights to a solution to the trade imbalances involving the third world and all that. Were you aware at the same time that the global corporations were about to shape a totally different universe? And they said that the national borders are not more relevant and more physical than the equator. So it's just to and yes, he said, we were aware, but we realized that if we would have addressed this question in the Commission, we wouldn't have been able to make a report. And so this was the second, that was the next problem we would solve then, he said. So, and you were the next step here, another step a little bit forward. But I remember the only one in the Brand Commission who really came back repeatedly to the question about the transnational, the TNCs and the MNCs was Olof Palme. He said, we don't say anything at all about so there was an awareness of it, but the problem was to do something about it.
Well, you could say that capitalism moved forward very rapidly, while policy lagged behind.
Yes.
And for every year, it became more and more clear that policy lagged behind. It's even more clear today than it was in 1995. So that was a process. It went, as you say, quite fast. And policy was the loser, and the market forces were the winners. We had the representatives of United States in the commission, but they agreed on this. That didn't help. we very soon discovered that we had enemies, so we had to tackle that. But maybe we continue on that line.
Yes, and that is, I think, that is the only solution to continue. I think in this time. But what do you think? Just a straight question. What do you think when you think back on that time and your proposal? What became of them, so to speak? Is it just a past history, or is there something you think is still worth to reflect on, to retrieve again and bring to the debate, or is it just let us stay there as a past?
And what I discovered very soon was that it was not only the 5 permanent members of the Security Council that were against our proposal. And we knew before that they will not like to lose their power, but we have to handle that one in another. And well, we thought we had large group of parties and people who understood and were aware, like we, that these were problems we had to solve. But what I discovered was we discovered, and I called it, that we had a negative coalition. A negative coalition of forces who were against reforming the United Nations. And that's surprising, but for different reasons. So were nations, certain of Israel was one example, but not only Israel. There were a number of others who were afraid of a reformed United Nations because they think that was a threat against them in one way or another. And that negative coalition was very, very strong. And but we hoped, okay, we know that, but perhaps it might be possible at least to have a discussion about these problems. But the strategy from this negative coalition, that was be quiet, don't make any remarks about this, and if there will be no discussion, there will be no reforms. And of course, I must admit, I became very sad about this situation. We tried after 1 year, Sonja and I, to get together in another meeting and have a new start. But that was the same. It was very quiet. It's the group that were interested were universities. They asked for our book and proposals, and they had discussion. But you know better than others that universities are intellectual worlds, and it's not always so easy to have an effect on the surrounding world. Where I'm very critical is media. You could expect that when we bring up these issues, it was not difficult to write about this and make interviews about this. but media were surprisingly quiet too. So the only support we had was an interest. That was the academic world. And we know the result today. If I may be a bit agitator again, we have Gaza. United Nations has no role at all. And that is a tragedy, I would say. That is a great, great tragedy.
What do you think? I agree very much here, but what do you think about the fact that in exactly 1 month, less than 1 month, in 3 weeks, there will be a World Leader Summit in New York about a future conference. And this conference will culminate in a agenda for the future. And if you read the draft of that agenda, and I think it is a World Summit for 2 days, so it won't be a conference where they are sitting like in the environment conferences and negotiate about the agenda and come out with different drafts and so on. So it will be to take it or leave it. And there in the preparatory work, they talk about this is a one generational event. And it is exactly more or less 1 generation, 30 years is you delivered report. And if you read that report, and the Guterres report to the conference is called Our Common Agenda. And read the proposal for the future pact. It is more or less what you wrote. It is a bit more about climate change now. It is because it was not, the climate change was not the big problem. It was environment pollution and resource exhaustion, and that, but the climate, the sustainability is it. And I couldn't avoid when I saw this, what they are going to discuss. It is your agenda. It's a once a generation conference. But they don't refer us. I haven't seen any reference to you, but I will read it a bit more carefully. So what do you think when you read this? Is it just, I mean, one thing is it just is it an action plan, or is it a normative catalogue? Is it a wish list, or is it what will be done?
Well, I'm very much in favor of Guterres' initiative. I think, which might surprise you, I believe they are bringing up the correct issues. And it's no surprise to me that they come back, not because our report was that good, but because we touched the real problems, and the real problems are still there. So if we did a good work, and Guterres is doing a good work today, they should be rather parallel. So that's not a surprise to me. And as I said, I hope very much that they will be more successful than we were. What is in their favor? Just that it's now in the Secretary General, with his position, that he is proposing this. I think that's good. We handed over our report at that time to the Secretary General, but they were not very active after that, probably because they felt they had not the support of the Security Council, the permanent members. Hammarskjöld had tried to do things on his own, and he was quite successful. He got the support by the General Assembly, but then he died. Was he killed or not? We don't know. But anyhow, he was not able to continue. And no one has, after that, not really dared to take steps like he did. Will it be possible today? Yes, I hope. But I think that the negative coalition is still there. And that we had to learn they don't want reforms. On the other hand, I ask myself, how could they sit in United Nations and have a formal responsibility and now take responsibility for a complete failure in doing something in Middle East, that the longest conflict we have had now, and many have had to pay a high price, lost their lives. Volker Bernadotte, who was one of the first representatives to become murdered. We forget about that sometimes, but that's how it has been. The reform process, the mediation process has been killed very often with violence. So as you can hear, I hope, but having gone through that process, I know that those forces against are strong and they don't want to discuss even. Yeah, it's in a way I'm happy to be sitting here now and being able to comment on it, but it's about the future of the world. It's extremely important that something is done now. So let's hope. Let's hope that this time media will pay more attention. Let's hope that all those groups who are in favor of United Nations, and they are many, speak out, participate in the debate. Academic universities, say what you think. Let us at least have a real debate now as a start. And then I can live with a reform process. It's not rapidly enough, perhaps, but let us see that it starts and that this gives some optimism and strength for speeding it up within a near future.
I think these are very good final words. Let us hope, and hope is what we can do, and let us dress hope in words, and let us speak about it, and let us say that there are alternatives to what is going on. And what they more precisely will lead to, that is a different question. Thank you very much for this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.